This is the CBS Evening News. I'm Charles Kuralt, sitting in tonight for Dan Rather. Good evening. The Middle East crisis passed into a new stage today of very cautious hope. The United States, Israel, and Iran all seem to see a chance for a deal that would free American hostages, as well as other captives in Lebanon and in Israel. President Bush said he wants to explore to the fullest a public offer of help by the new president of Iran. Mr. Bush said he's encouraged, but he called the whole thing a brutal process, and he said he doesn't want to raise unrealistic hopes among the families of Americans who are held by pro-Iranian kidnappers. From Damascus, Alan Pizzi begins our report.
These Hezbollah followers were so busy chanting "Death to America" today that they couldn't possibly have heard the startling new message from Iranian President Ali Akbar Rafsanjani, that Tehran is willing to work with the White House to solve the hostage crisis. The hostages themselves might have been within earshot of the demonstration. But even if they could hear it, the ritual hate would have obscured the barely discernible crack in their prison door. Sheikh Mohammed Fadlallah, spiritual leader of Hezbollah, predicted today that no more hostages would be killed. Algeria, which played a key mediating role in the U.S. Embassy hostage crisis, stepped into the mix today too. UN Under-Secretary Marek Goulding met Algerian diplomats in West Beirut as part of his mission to determine the fate of Marine Lieutenant Colonel William Higgins. The UN men also met with Hezbollah leaders.
He gave me a full description of Hezbollah's attitude to the question of hostages, the question of southern Lebanon, and the question of Colonel Higgins.
Indications are that Iran and Syria have taken a hand in formulating that attitude. Informed sources said senior Hezbollah security men visited the Iranian embassy here in Damascus yesterday and today to discuss the hostage crisis. The Iranians are echoing the kidnappers' demand that the Israelis release the Muslim cleric Sheikh Obed, whom they abducted. Rafsanjani called on Washington to, as he put it, pressure Israel by threatening to suspend their aid. The opening gambit may not look like progress, but it is a major improvement on threats of murder and military retaliation. As the wife of reprieved hostage Joseph Sicipio put it,
"Thank you, and thank you very, very much."
Eventually, the radical new message of negotiation may even penetrate this din, but it will take time and patience, and the hostages aren't likely to hear the message soon. Alan Pizzi, CBS News, Damascus.
President Bush said today he has been engaged in an extraordinarily broad exercise of diplomacy over the last few days. Leslie Stahl can give us the latest from the White House. Leslie?
Charles, the White House says that while there have been many exchanges with Iran over the past few days through third parties, none of those private messages was as positive as the public statement of Rafsanjani today. And because of that, President Bush responded to Rafsanjani's offer for help with some optimism, but a lot of caution.
I don't know the total role of any individual country in that area in all of this, but when you see a statement that offers hope for the return of our hostages, I want to explore it to the fullest.
The president said he feels the burden of going to every end possible to find the hostages, to explore ways to win their release. But his spokesman said we're always skeptical of what we hear from Iran. There's a reluctance to trust Rafsanjani.
The Iranians have said a lot of things over the years. Usually when the pressure is on and when the pressure is relieved, they have been known to change their position.
Rafsanjani's offer of help came with conditions. The administration has some of its own.
Any improvement in relations between us will be contingent on Iranian willingness to act responsibly in the world arena.
Mr. Bush lived through President Reagan's hostage nightmares, the deals pursued with Rafsanjani and other Iranians, and the disappointments that followed.
I'm encouraged, but I don't want to get the hopes of the hostages' loved ones up once again, to have those hopes dashed. This is a brutal process.
Officials here speak wearily of dealing with Iran. They say there have been many overtures in the past with businessmen as third parties or diplomats or third countries, but in each case the road ends one way or the other with Iran asking for $100 million or for TOW missiles or for something. And here at the White House they want to leave the door open this time, but they are very skeptical. Charles?
Leslie Stahl, thank you. Israel has indicated it would be willing to trade Sheikh Obaid for 3 Israeli soldiers captured in Lebanon. Now it appears that could be part of a much bigger deal and a much more complicated one. Bob Simon has the latest from Tel Aviv.
The Israelis were waiting for concrete proposals today, not knowing whether it would be a question of hours or days. Officials in Jerusalem said the drama is over for the time being. What they see ahead of them now is a long road with many ups and downs, but a road, they say, which just might lead somewhere.
We hope and pray that we will succeed to get our boys back up.
One mother waiting for her boy to come home is Mrs. Obaid, the mother of the Sheikh. In Beirut today, she said she is sick and paralyzed. She appealed for her son's release. The Sheikh's father appealed for the release of all the hostages. In Israel, officials following the interrogation of the Sheikh said they're learning that the connection between Tehran and Hezbollah is closer than they'd thought, that Iran exercises far tighter control than they had previously suspected. Until now, they say, it's been hard to get information about Hezbollah. The Sheikh, they point out, is the group's first guest of honor in the Western world. In exchange for the release of the hostages, Israel has already said it would return the Sheikh, as well as more than 100 other Shiite prisoners, many of whom are held in this northern Israeli jail. Yesterday's Hezbollah demand for the release of Palestinian detainees has already become a political issue here. Right-wingers have asked for a parliamentary debate. They claim that after 1985, when Israel freed 1,150 prisoners in exchange for 3 Israeli soldiers, many of those Palestinians have been involved in terrorism. Several are suspected of having participated in the bombing of Pan Am 103. But Israeli officials are not concerned about this initial Hezbollah list. In the Middle East, a list price is never taken seriously. It is a bargaining position, nothing more. What's encouraging, the Israelis say, is that they've been invited into the market, which to get anything done in this part of the world is the only place to be. Bob Simon, CBS News, Tel Aviv.
The White House has declined to comment on reports that the president was prepared to bomb Hezbollah strongholds in Lebanon if the kidnappers killed Joseph Sicipio yesterday. U.S. warships were in position to launch a strike. As Pentagon correspondent David Martin reports, they still are.
The Coral Sea's warplanes were on the flight deck, armed and ready to launch a strike last night against targets inside Lebanon, including the headquarters of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, the Sheikh Abdullah barracks. The Syrians seemed to give their tacit approval to the strike by shutting down parts of their air defense system. The 2,000 Iranian Revolutionary Guards in Lebanon had evacuated their barracks in anticipation of a strike. All that remained was the execute order from President Bush. The White House insists the president had not made up his mind, but the Pentagon, already angered by the apparent murder of one of its own, Marine Lieutenant Colonel Rich Higgins, hoped to get the go-ahead if hostage Joseph Sicipio was executed. Today, preparations for a retaliatory strike continue. A submarine armed with cruise missiles has joined the Coral Sea in the eastern Mediterranean. The battleship Iowa, which also carries cruise missiles, will be there by tomorrow. With those 2 ships in position, the Navy could launch a strike against Sheikh Abdullah barracks without risking the lives of pilots. Within a few more days, the aircraft carrier America will be off the southern coast of Iran, ready to launch strikes against the Iranian oil terminal at Karg Island. A U.S. military strike would increase the risk that other American hostages might be executed. But administration officials say that if they don't do something, the hostage crisis could go on forever. David Martin, CBS News, the Pentagon.
Still to come on the CBS Evening News, John Blackstone on how farming is poisoning the San Joaquin Valley. And Richard Roth on Leona Helmsley, who is said to have said, only the little people pay taxes. Economy may be slowing down, but it managed to create 169,000 jobs last month. That helped reduce the civilian unemployment rate 1/10 of a point to 5.2%. As of today, striking Eastern Airlines pilots and flight attendants and machinists have been off their jobs for 5 months. Both sides of this bitter dispute between labor and management, Doug Tennell reports, feel this is a fight for survival.
On New York's Wall Street today, Eastern workers marked the beginning of their 6th month on strike with the pledge never to go back to work for Eastern's current owner, Frank Lorenzo. But outside the Eastern headquarters compound in Miami, a dispute that began in the cool South Florida spring has run into the blistering heat of summer. The picket line is growing increasingly violent. Frustration is on the rise. For most of those who still rely on $100 a week and bags of free groceries from the union, 5 months of being out of work is beginning to cut deep, very deep. A 42-year-old Atlanta-based machinist named Skip Bachmuller was one of at least 4 strike-related suicides so far.
We've had people who've lost homes. We've had a lot of families broken up over divorces. People just couldn't take the stress.
This is the image airline executives want to project of the new Eastern, a stable, nearly whole airline. This week, Eastern expanded its daily flights to 348, 1/3 its pre-strike schedule.
Thanks a lot.
But to fill its planes, the airline has set fares so low, many flights are losing money.
Airline executives have been desperately trying to woo striking pilots back to work and failing. So far, little more than 10% have crossed the picket line.
The airline is so short of experienced flight crews, it is using planes and crews from Continental to meet its ambitious daily flight schedule.
Of course we're still losing money. We projected in our business plan that to take a company that's 61 years old and rebuild it from scratch in 7 to 8 months was going to be a period of losses.
For machinist Mike Fisher, Eastern is already a write-off. He is moving his family north in search of other work. His wife Sonia talks to other Eastern wives who wish their husbands would cross the picket line.
And they just don't care. They're going to send their husbands to work. They don't care if they throw bottles and cans at them. They just need the money to come through.
5 months after they walked off the job, fewer than 1/3 of Eastern striking employees have taken other work. 5 months from now, company executives say, they will be out of bankruptcy with a rebuilt Eastern. Doug Tennell, CBS News, Miami.
Rushed by Congress to adjourn for the end of summer, the House passed a defense spending bill today that would cut some of President Bush's favorite military projects. Mr. Bush is threatening a veto unless the bill is changed. Congressional and White House negotiators did agree on a version of a savings and loan bailout bill that is acceptable to Mr. Bush, but several influential Democratic congressmen said they didn't like it. And the Senate approved an oil spill cleanup bill today that would, among other things, increase the liability of companies responsible for accidents. It's not an oil spill, but a naturally occurring element that's the cause of unnaturally high danger in some of the nation's richest farmland. John Blackstone reports from California on irrigation projects that backfired.
In California's San Joaquin Valley, land that produces 1/3 of the nation's food, there is growing acreage that is dead and sometimes deadly. Farmers call these evaporation ponds. Some environmentalists call them toxic waste dumps.
The cost of cleaning it up is so great, there is no known way to clean it up. It is worse than any municipal sewage in the state of California.
The ponds are filled with runoff from the valley's massive irrigation projects. The same water that makes the valley bloom can become dangerous once it's drained through the soil.
It's something that sort of sneaked up on us, and we've invited in a way through inaction. And so this is one of the big water problems of the United States or of North America.
There's a problem because the runoff water contains selenium, a natural element that when concentrated causes death and deformity in wildlife. But farmers are being forced to pump their contaminated runoff from beneath their land because after decades of irrigation, this agricultural oasis is waterlogged. Beneath the surface of a 150-mile stretch of the valley, a thick layer of clay prevents irrigation water from draining any deeper than 148 feet. The rising water is flooding the root zone and killing crops.
Makes me feel very threatened. I know the problem's there. Day by day, it's getting worse.
There was a plan to drain the salty water all the way from the valley to San Francisco Bay, but environmentalists brought the project to a dead end after 88 miles of the drain were built. And now, with the discovery of selenium, it seems likely the San Luis drain will remain dry forever. The deadly effect of selenium was first discovered at nearby Kesterson Wildlife Refuge in 1983. Farmers were ordered to stop pumping their rising groundwater into the refuge, but they were given nowhere else to put it. They started building evaporation ponds that now may be even more deadly.
They're finding 10 times the level of deformity and reproductive toxicity at half the level of selenium concentration that they found at Kesterson.
There are 7,000 acres of evaporation ponds and more being built. Environmentalists say many ponds are killing enough birds to be ordered closed by federal officials, but not one has been shut down.
Due to those fowl dying from time to time, they might close these ponds. I guess they could do it any day. I hope they don't, but they could, and that's disastrous.
Scientists searching for a solution say there is no easy or inexpensive answer for the San Joaquin Valley. It is an irony that in a place where nature seems so abundant, the balance of nature is so threatened. John Blackstone, CBS News, Tranquility, California.
Forest fires in the West have now burned 250,000 acres of woodland. In California, 11,000 acres have gone up in flames. In the Cleveland National Forest, that's the home of Mount Palomar Observatory, hundreds of firefighters are on that job, battling the flames, hot, dry weather, and rugged terrain. They have the fire more than half contained.
Thank
News in New York today is playing not on Broadway, but in federal court in downtown Manhattan. It stars hotel magnate Leona Helmsley as an alleged tax evader and extortionist. Correspondent Richard Roth has a review.
One of the participants has already described the trial as New York's summer extravaganza. Helmsley is one of the biggest names in New York real estate, a symbol of wealth and power stamped on some of the city's biggest buildings.
Harry owns about 200 buildings.
The prosecution charges Leona and her billionaire husband Harry cheated on their taxes, diverting $4 million from hotels and other businesses to improve their suburban estate, with extras including an outdoor sound system and a covered swimming pool.
Not a penny less than $1 million for the pool and the... Silence means a sin.
Just about right. The trial's about greed. It's about an unbridled lust for power and greed, and again, the way that they've decided to treat people in their accumulation of that power. That's what it is.
The defense says the Helmsleys never intended to break any laws. They were victims of unscrupulous underlings and had large but legitimate business expenses. Part of the defense strategy is to defuse the regal public image that Leona has cultivated as the royal hostess of a chain of 23 hotels, and the private reputation, in the words of one critic, as the Lady Macbeth of the lodging industry.
You have nothing to do? You have nothing to do?
Waiting, ma'am.
In court, her own lawyer said Leona Helmsley may be abusive and rude, but she's not charged, he warned the jury, with being a tough bitch. You don't put people in jail for being unpopular. The risk, according to some experts, is that the jury might do exactly that.
It's a terrible handicap to go to trial with an unpopular person because it's a human enterprise. People, will acquit people they like and they will convict people they don't like.
And the trial so far hasn't tarnished Leona's reputation as the woman New York loves to hate. Witnesses have described her as a bad-tempered Scrooge with a heart of lead. "We don't pay taxes," a housekeeper quoted her. "The little people pay taxes." The people on the jury include laborers and union members who've been told by Helmsley's lawyer to keep in mind this case is special. "Let's face it," he said, referring to the Helmsleys, $1 million to them isn't the same as it is to you and me. Richard Roth, CBS News, New York.
A U.S. Air Force captain has been restricted to base in Texas. Captain John Hirsch reportedly is under investigation for activities while he was in Berlin. Reportedly, he failed a polygraph test. It's marking its bicentennial. The lighthouse. 200 years ago this coming Monday, President George Washington signed a law giving the federal government control over the new nation's lighthouses. There were only 12 of them at the time. Today, there are nearly 500 in operation, one severely threatened. Peter Van Sant reports on the battle to save a national landmark.
It's the heart of the island. It's the heart of the island, without a doubt.
It's part of our life. It's our heritage.
The Cape Hatteras Lighthouse on North Carolina's Outer Banks. For 119 years, it has warned mariners away from the treacherous Diamond Shoals, an area known as the graveyard of the Atlantic, a place where the skeletons of unlucky ships litter the shore. Today, the tallest brick lighthouse in the U.S. is itself threatened by a rising sea, creeping ever closer to the old tower.
It's going to go to the sea. The ocean's going to take it, without a doubt. They're going to have to do something with it.
Engineers have built jetties to slow down beach erosion, but the barriers haven't worked.
It's definitely threatened by erosion. Even though there's a couple hundred feet of beach in front of it, that could all be taken out in one storm. It could undermine the lighthouse or topple it by huge waves.
The National Park Service wants to save the lighthouse, and it announced battle plans to combat the approaching sea, including one option to lift the tower and move it inland.
But the idea of moving this historic landmark has set off a stormy response from local islanders who believe that well-intentioned engineers will do to their beloved lighthouse what Mother Nature's worst hurricanes could not: destroy it.
I guess the people can't see how they can move a structure that weighs 2,600 tons, and they're just afraid it'll fall.
Rather than having man move it, I'd rather see it fall into the ocean.
Ironically, people who love the lighthouse are opposed to what could be the best plan to preserve it, saying a relocated lighthouse wouldn't be the same.
They would actually destroy what we consider our heritage. I mean, how would you feel, how would the people in New York feel if they decided to move the Statue of Liberty?
While the debate grows more intense, the sea is moving closer to the lighthouse at a rate of 11 feet a year. And with the hurricane season underway, geologists warn that a powerful storm could end the debate by knocking the old beacon into the sand. Peter Van Sant, CBS News, Cape Hatteras, North Carolina.
And that's the CBS Evening News. Bob Schieffer will be here tomorrow, and Connie Chung on Sunday. Dan Rather will be back Monday. I'm Charles Kuralt. Good night.
This is CBS.